Section 1 of the Life of Samuel Johnson, Volume 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Life of Samuel Johnson, Volume 2, by James Boswell, Section 1. In 1764 and 1765 it should seem that Dr. Johnson was so busily employed with his edition of Shakespeare as to have had little leisure for any other literary exertion, or indeed even for private correspondence. He did not favour me with a single letter for more than 2 years, for which it will appear that he afterwards apologized. He was, however, at all times ready to give assistance to his friends and others in revising their works, and in writing for them, or greatly improving their dedications. In that courtly species of composition no man excelled Dr. Johnson. Though the loftiness of his mind prevented him from ever dedicating in his own person, he wrote a very great number of dedications for others. Some of these, the persons who were favoured with them are unwilling should be mentioned, from a too anxious apprehension, as I think, that they might be suspected of having received larger assistance; and some, after all the diligence I have bestowed, have escaped my inquiries. He told me, a great many years ago, he believed he had dedicated to all the royal family round, and it was indifferent to him what was the subject of the work dedicated, provided it were innocent. He once dedicated some music for the German flute to Edward, Duke of York. In writing dedications for others, he considered himself as by no means speaking his own sentiments. Notwithstanding his long silence, I never omitted to write to him when I had anything worthy of communicating. I generally kept copies of my letters to him, that I might have a full view of our correspondence, and never be at a loss to understand any reference in his letters. He kept the greater part of mine very carefully, and a short time before his death was attentive enough to seal them up in bundles and order them to be delivered to me, which was accordingly done. Amongst them I found one of which I had not made a copy, and which I own I read with pleasure at the distance of almost 20 years. It is dated November 1765, at the palace of Pascal Paoli in Corte, the capital of Corsica, and is full of generous enthusiasm. After giving a sketch of what I had seen and heard in that island, it proceeded thus: I dare to call this a spirited tour. I dare to challenge your approbation. This letter produced the following answer, which I found on my arrival at Paris. À Monsieur Boswell, chez Monsieur Waters, banquier à Paris. Dear Sir, apologies are seldom of any use. We will delay till your arrival the reasons, good or bad, which have made me such a sparing and ungrateful correspondent. Be assured for the present that nothing has lessened either the esteem or love with which I dismissed you at Harwich. Both have been increased by all that I have been told of you by yourself or others, and when you return, you will return to an unaltered and, I hope, unalterable friend. All that you have to fear from me is the vexation of disappointing me. No man loves to frustrate expectations which have been formed in his favour, and the pleasure which I promise myself from your journals and remarks is so great, that perhaps no degree of attention or discernment will be sufficient to avoid it. Come home, however, and take your chance. I long to see you and to hear you, and hope that we shall not be so long separated again. Come home, and expect such a welcome as is due to him whom a wise and noble curiosity has led where perhaps no native of this country ever was before. I have no news to tell you that can deserve your notice, nor would I willingly lessen the pleasure that any novelty may give you at your return. I am afraid we shall find it difficult to keep among us a mind which has been so long feasted with variety. But let us try what esteem and kindness can effect. As your father's liberality has indulged you with so long a ramble, I doubt not but you will think his sickness, or even his desire to see you, a sufficient reason for hastening your return. The longer we live, and the more we think, the higher value we learn to put on the friendship and tenderness of parents and of friends. Parents we can have but once, and he promises himself too much who enters life with the expectation of finding many friends. Upon some motive I hope that you will be here soon, and am willing to think that it will be an inducement to your return, that it is sincerely desired by, dear Sir, your affectionate and humble servant, Sam Johnson. Johnson's Court, Fleet Street, January 14th, 1766. I returned to London in February, and found Dr. Johnson in a good house in Johnson's Court, Fleet Street, in which he had accommodated Miss Williams with an apartment on the ground floor, while Mr. Levet occupied his post in the garret. His faithful Francis was still attending upon him. He received me with much kindness. The fragments of our first conversation, which I have preserved, are these. I told him that Voltaire, in a conversation with me, had distinguished Pope and Dryden thus: Pope drives a handsome chariot, with a couple of neat trim nags; Dryden a coach and 6 stately horses. Johnson: Why, sir, the truth is, they both drive coaches and 6, but Dryden's horses are either galloping or stumbling, Pope's go at a steady even trot. He said of Goldsmith's Traveller, which had been published in my absence, there has not been so fine a poem since Pope's time. And here it is proper to settle, with authentic precision, what has long floated in public report, as to Johnson's being himself the author of a considerable part of that poem. Much, no doubt, both of the sentiments and expression were derived from conversation with him, and it was certainly submitted to his friendly revision, but in the year 1783 he, at my request, marked with a pencil the lines which he had furnished, which are only line 420, to stop too fearful and too faint to go, and the concluding 10 lines, except the last couplet but one. How small of all that human hearts endure that part which kings or laws can cause or cure. Still to ourselves in every place consigned, our own felicity we make or find. With secret course, which no loud storms annoy, glides the smooth current of domestic joy. The lifted axe, the agonizing wheel, Luke's iron crown, and Damien's bed of steel, to men remote from power, but rarely known, leave reason, faith, and conscience all our own. He added, These are all of which I can be sure. They bear a small proportion to the whole, which consists of 438 verses. Goldsmith, in the couplet which he inserted, mentions Luke as a person well known, and superficial readers have passed it over quite smoothly, while those of more attention have been as much perplexed by Luke as by Lydiat in The Vanity of Human Wishes. The truth is that Goldsmith himself was in a mistake. In the Res Publica Hungarian there is an account of a desperate rebellion in the year 1514, headed by 2 brothers of the name of Zek, George and Luke. When it was quelled, George, not Luke, was punished by his head being encircled with a red-hot iron crown, corona candescente ferrea coronato. The same severity of torture was exercised on the Earl of Athol, one of the murderers of King James I of Scotland. Dr. Johnson at the same time favoured me by marking the lines which he furnished to Goldsmith's Deserted Village, which are only the last 4. That trade's proud empire hastes to swift decay, as ocean sweeps the laboured mole away, while self-dependent power can time defy, as rocks resist the billows and the sky. Talking of education, people have nowadays, said he, got a strange opinion that everything should be taught by lectures. Now I cannot see that lectures can do so much good as reading the books from which the lectures are taken. I know nothing that can be best taught by lectures, except where experiments are to be shown. You may teach chemistry by lectures. You might teach making of shoes by lectures. At night I supped with him at the Mitre